Hello, welcome to Prometheus Podcast. This is our pilot episode. My name is Landon Wade. I'm here with my co-host Sean Jew.
Hello.
And Colin Burns.
Howdy.
Just to give you a little bit of context, we are inside student housing, huddled around a microphone that has a sweatshirt around it, eating pizza rolls and just kind of enjoying ourselves here.
Yeah.
We're real excited to talk to you about architecture. We are all three architecture students in college right now.
Yes, we are.
And obviously,
We're all a little giddy for this episode.
I did not know you were going to say howdy.
Yeah, we're still trying to work out the kinks with our group. You know, it's really hard to get in front of a bunch of random people and talk about something. But, you know, we're just want to let y'all into the life of what it is to go on a day-to-day adventure with an architecture student and just the thoughts and processes that we go through daily between friends, colleagues, even parents. Just to, you know, help bring you some new perspective in your daily life.
the three of us are pretty passionate about architecture in different ways. I think part of the reason we want to do this podcast, part of the reason we called it Prometheus Podcast, is because we seek to help normal people, just regular Joe Schmo, people that are not architects, to connect with architecture in their lives. So later in this episode, we'll be discussing a little bit about one of our favorite movies, Captain America: Civil War, and some of the controversies along with that, connecting that to architecture. So that's going to be a pretty exciting part of this podcast. We're going to get you introduced to the gang a little bit. Sean, I guess if you want to start out, we can just talk about your career in architecture and where we've come from here.
Well, I mean, I'm a third-year architect. Honestly, when I joined this major, I never really gave a second thought. Never even really gave a first thought to begin with. The list went from A to Z, and I didn't want to go to agriculture, and that's how I ended up in architecture. Had really no talent in it whatsoever, but I really liked it, and I think this is what I want to do, so I stuck with it. And I've never made more than a B in a studio, but you know, that's kind of because the professors suck, but we'll get into that later.
We don't have to talk about that right now. That's episodes to follow.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a great major. I think I can really speak from the perspective of the people that had never really encountered architecture in their lives.
Exactly.
That's it for me.
I gotcha. And Colin, what brings you to the architecture world today?
Well, let's see where to start. I began originally with a civil engineer mindset, leaving high school, and realized I wanted to lean more towards a path that allowed me to build things, but with a little more creativity and less mathematical-based presets. And from there, I've really started to lean more towards, you know, design, digital fabrication with a little more creativity in the 3D computer realm, and more towards commercial, not really residential homes, but allow me to interact with the day-to-day world, you know, as Landon said, the regular Joe Schmo at his, you know, accounting job or, you know, business job or sales job, really allow me to connect myself to these regular people that don't really get to experience what it's like to go through the mindset and everyday challenges we go through as architects.
Exactly. Yeah, well, I really would classify, you know, Sean and Colin and I are, I think, what I would call unlikely friends, because we're all pretty different. Colin comes from a very hardworking, a little bit more southern background. It's classic, you know, gravy and biscuit type background.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good kind of stuff. Sean is actually from Korea. And
That's right.
You know, Sean wrestled in high school. He's everybody knows Sean, you know, and like he said, he may not be known as the smartest kid in school, but everybody knows Sean, and Sean knows everybody, and that's a really important thing. So we're all pretty different. Me, Landon, I come from a pretty long history of architecture. My background, my grandfather and father are architects. My father is also a professor at a college of architecture, and so architecture is something that I was brought up in, and it's something that I've understood probably more than the Joe Schmo, you know, on average throughout my life. And really, all of our perspectives here, one of the things we wanted to really nail with this podcast, and both in this episode and from here on out, we really just want to make architecture relatable to people, because we none of us believe that architecture is just for the few, but it is for people who can appreciate it and learn to appreciate it. So we're really bringing that fire and that knowledge to you, the people, as you listen to us, and obviously, we're not know-it-alls. We don't know everything. We're just kids right now.
Part of the reason why we're doing this right now as students is so we get out of the liability of having to have professional knowledge over these ideas. And
exactly.
Yeah.
This really is just for our credit. That has nothing to do with wanting to be heard or anything like that.
Yeah.
We're just trying to look good. That's pretty much what it is.
Oh yeah.
So I think that kind of covers, most of our introductions. Sean's kind of our class clown. Everybody knows him. Colin's the hardworking, pretty classic
DIY, man.
DIY. That's kind of how he put it.
Is that how
got duct tape and zip ties? I can fix it. Don't worry.
That's right.
That sounds almost criminal, but
anyway, I don't really know what to classify myself as, but I guess
I would say you're the moral man of the group. You're the guy that keeps us in check morally when we start to get into iffy situations.
He's a guy. Landon's the guy that keeps me and Colin from going to the very deepest part of hell. He'll at least keep us on the surface,
or keep us out of jail at least.
I've got my heels dug in up here, trying to keep him from falling down.
Yeah, maybe we'll take him with us. I don't know.
Great. So I think that provides a pretty good basis for Prometheus podcasts and kind of what we're after for our mission statement. I really want to get started now with kind of the meat of this episode and a topic that I honestly have lost count how many times we've debated this since this film came out. Captain America's Civil War. Sean's over here grinning because he's getting ready for an argument already.
People need to understand that my arguments are not going to look good because it's going to be 2 versus 1 basically. But
well, in this context,
I would say it's 2. It's going to be 1 versus 1 with Landon trying to be the mediator between our 2 very opposing ideas.
You just got to know that I'm right. That's all I'm
Sean,
saying.
That's the other thing is Sean is he always thinks he's right, which
is true.
It's uncommon for people to think that. I think
it's actually true.
Yeah. So okay. Introduction. In case you haven't seen Captain America Civil War, in case you don't enjoy Marvel movies, I'll give you kind of a brief synopsis of what's happening here. And it's going to be real brief, so I'd encourage you, if you haven't seen the film, go watch. It was really good. All of us agree it was a great film, so you can go watch it to really get into the depth of what's happening. But in the basic essentials of what's happening, you have Captain America's best friend, Bucky, is actually a fugitive of the state. He's running. He's a good guy. He's just done some bad things, right? But Captain America's known this guy since he was a kid, and it just so happens that the Avengers, this team of superheroes, they are all trying to get this guy because the government told them to. Captain America's struggling with that because he knows he's a good guy, and the government's stepping in with these things called what were they called? The
Sokovia Accords.
Sokovia Accords, that's what it is. I always forget about the paperwork and all that stuff.
If you don't know about Sokovia Accords, Age of Ultron covers it really well.
Yeah, exactly. So basically you have these two sides with, hence the name Civil War. So you have Captain America kind of defending the honor of his friend, trusting that, his friend is a good person. He's investing really heavily in the power of the individual and in his friend's potential. And Iron Man and some of the Avengers side on the side of the law that's man-made, and that they all right, sorry. I'm trying not to set this up for my side here, but he's trying to, so Iron Man's really trying to respect the higher power through the government, and do as they wish to obey a certain order, and he has some good points in the film. He talks about how if they don't obey the law, then who will, who's that kind of a thing. So Iron Man's here obeying the Sokovia Accords, which essentially say that the Avengers, these superheroes, they can only act with authority from the government. They can't just go out and bust around and shoot stuff like they have been in all the films until this point, until Civil War. So is that a pretty accurate? I think it's pretty accurate.
I would say that's a pretty accurate synopsis.
That's actually a really good synopsis without getting into the spoilers.
I was really trying to not be biased there. It's a little bit difficult for me. Those of you that know me or that are listening that understand a little bit more of who I am, I right off the bat am pretty much Captain America on his side, not just because I want his body, but because I want to I want to be moral. I want to take care of people for who they are individually. You know,
I want
think
those moral standards.
I think
Yeah.
Landon has a Captain America shield tattoo right on his left side of the buttocks.
yeah, right. Nope,
He's got that,
it's clean.
that Cap Tramp stamp.
So okay, I guess I can. Unless Sean, unless you want to kick off the argument. Sean,
No, let's let Colin kick off.
Sean is the one that's most liable to make the mic levels too high, and this is so we're making sure Sean's.
I'm gonna
sitting
take 3
further
steps
back.
away from the
Sean's
mic.
backing up. Sean's backing up for the microphone right now, so when he starts yelling, we're not. Anyway.
I would say the way we've always started this argument is really, what can you justify in your own life? Would you take morals to hold a higher standing than the law, or would it be for you vice versa? You think the law should be held higher to yourself over moral standards? And that's where I'm going to start this argument with Sean. Is I do believe in some regards that your morals should be held higher than the law.
I mean, it sounds good. It's definitely ear candy to somebody to say that morals are more important than the laws and individuals should be respected rather than the groups, because that's what democracy is all about. Democracy is about an individual being respected, and individual having authorities, and individual having a right to say things. But when you're trying to hold a society together, when you're in a seat of a government, those things don't completely go out the window, but some of those things need to be sacrificed. And I'm not saying it needs to be sacrificed to the point where it becomes an autocracy and a dictatorship, but I'm just saying there needs to be a logical sacrifice by the people for the government for a greater power that
for the good of the people.
for the good of the people eventually, because the government is the fence that keeps everybody safe. And when one of the fence breaks down, somebody's gonna have to fix it, take their time onto it. And so that's why I think morals are good. Individual morals are great. I respect people that can hold individual morals together, because I definitely can't. However, a power of law and the Constitution, those things just needs to be respected, and those things are made by many individuals who have agreed together to make it into a law. So an individual moral does sort of lose power in front of those things.
Colin's getting ready for a rebuttal here. What you got
Well,
to say?
any of you listeners that know your politics, we all know politicians aren't well known for having great moral standards.
Wow, we're bringing the listeners to this. It's getting emotional.
No, we're just, I think it's
And
just
Sean
important.
can agree with me on this. Most politicians are in it for money and greed. Moral standards in politics left the window in the 1780s.
Wow, okay, that's...
Where they could start to bend laws to benefit their kickbacks, their per capita, and their gains annually.
I think I'm in the hot seats here right now.
Yeah, you want to say that they build a fence and that we should sacrifice morals for them to build the fence, but when we start to sacrifice more morals, they don't just build a fence, they build a wall. And that blocks us from allowing to even use those morals. And you also want to think about this. You're talking about the Constitution and all the Sokovia Accords was not gonna be a law incorporated to the civilians. This was a military act.
That's actually where I would love to make my rebuttal from. Sokovia Accords basically was a check to the power of the Avengers.
It's a check and balance.
Yes,
correct.
It was. And that's how America, which is it's a republic. Bleh. Oh my god, I'm having tongue twisters. But it is a republic, and that's how America divides its power from legislature to executive and to the judicial. And by dividing the powers, they can create checks and balances, which doesn't let any of the branches really run in front of others. Right. And that's what makes it so beautiful. And, you talk about politicians being corrupt. Yeah, sure, politicians are corrupt. Not all, but a lot that gets the media coverage.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little biased because obviously...
Is it biased if it's true?
Media is going to cover those that are more interesting. those that have been
obviously.
corrupted.
Yeah.
But those people that media does not cover, can you really say that they're corrupted without looking into them? I mean, this is a country where everybody's innocent before they're proven guilty.
Right.
So we can't just assume that everybody, all the politicians are corrupted.
Well,
of course, they need to make compromises, and compromises are there. There are great compromises
Well,
to stop the Civil War, the actual Civil War, not the
the
Captain
actual
America. And there were compromises have to be made because it's the two ends of the extreme coming together to form a nation.
I want to disagree with that Civil War statement. You said there were checks and balances, but where are the checks and balances when Union soldiers were pillaging, burning, raping, killing innocent people just to win the war? Where's the checks and balance in that abuse of power from the North to the South?
And Southern slave owners were raping, killing, whipping.
Okay, let's be honest. Only the top 0.01% of the Southern society could own a slave.
You can't.
This is where it starts to get heated, right here.
The 100% when only 0.01% of the population is the one abusing those people.
We are getting a little sidetracked, but
bring it.
You can't escape the blame as a Southerner.
Yes, you can.
That is I have the highest respect for everybody. I prefer non-discrimination, really, but back in the day, I mean, it has been historically spoken exaggerated. The stories in the South, not every single plantation owners had slaves, but the fact that some slave owners have whipped and killed and raped their slaves.
Those are the stories everybody hears.
Yeah, those are
it's like the media.
That is exactly the point that I'm trying to make with politicians. Is that those are the guys that people write books and people make records about. It's not the boring average Joes that's working their own
I think we can agree with that. I think we can agree on that.
Yes, I would say that's a
but really, like what the issue we're trying to address here, especially in Captain America: Civil War, is really this idea, less about the politicians, because we know all people are flawed and imperfect. That's a given. So whether they're good or bad, whether the media covers them or not, these situations still arise.
I'm kind of hurt by the fact that whenever Landon said flawed, he just pointed straight at me.
I did not point.
That was
you saw nothing, audience.
Wow.
Anyway, so I guess really the argument is kind of this moral versus law. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, those things happen to be the same.
Yeah.
In some cases, one happens to be higher than the other. I think where it gets tricky is when is the fact when you get to an individual, you have X number of individuals who are above the line, whose morals are higher than the law, and you have X number of individuals whose morals are lower than the law. Higher, lower, respectively, meaning more restrictive or less restrictive than the laws of the land.
We're not faulting anybody.
Right.
It's an individual's choice.
This is totally objectively speaking, right?
And
so
the real tricky part of this argument is, are we allowed to make spoilers? That's the real tricky part.
Well, I mean, I just told them to watch the film, so they'll understand.
I believe everybody that's listening right now have watched the film. It's a great film.
Yeah, if you haven't watched it by now, or pause this to go watch it and come back.
Sorry, I want to jump back. I remember earlier Sean said, innocent until proven guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's take a minute. For those in the audience that have seen the film, the prejudgment by the government and some of the Avengers, was that Bucky was automatically guilty.
And that's why the Team Iron Man were trying to capture him to take him to the court. They weren't taking him to the firing range, to the firing squad. They were simply trying to get him to the court where he is
but let's also,
going to be counted.
You also have to think, they aren't taking him to a public court. They're taking him to a military trial.
And that's true.
And therefore, in a military trial, they can hold you in prison as long as they want.
But we need to face
before
the fact
a trial.
That have Bucky killed anybody is Bucky a murderer? And I think it's a yes.
Well, but that's the thing. Was it really Bucky? Because we do also remember, for those of you who have seen, I think it was in Winter Soldier, where you get a little bit more background regarding Bucky and what happens to him after he and Captain America split ways back in the time of World War II.
Remember?
Yeah,
He'd
so
fallen off the train.
He dies, right? He dies, quote unquote, falls off this train, but you kind of don't really know until you meet him again in Winter Soldier. You get some back as Winter Soldier. You get some background into his life, and you start to realize, as they show this in the films, that he is actually being, I would say, psychologically manipulated. He's completely hypnotized.
He is.
And so the question is, is that really Bucky? Is he getting? Oh, yep, yeah. There's the middle finger. Okay, is he really Bucky? At this point, so should he be tried as the same man? Having been released basically from what is that hypnosis?
I do not have
hypnosis.
I do not have extended knowledge into military trial, but if he is, I'm just gonna pretend that he's going to be tried at a public court,
right,
instead of military court. Let's just do that for a second,
for the sake of argument.
So, obviously, Bucky is innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
And he will be tried for the murder for the things that he's done as the Winter Soldier.
Right.
Now, in the movie, Captain America does come across the serums that have made that sort of effect onto, wow, I'm having tongue twisters like every time I talk. But he does come across those serums that have made those kind of effects.
Right.
Well, it's not even a serum. It's a Russian saying.
Well, no.
Yeah, because the serums you're talking about.
The serum just allows, with the word said in Russian, to induce that hypnosis state.
But yes, I know.
Where he does what you say.
Okay.
He does come across those, and after extensive studies, of course, if you are the lawyer of Bucky.
Yeah, right.
You're going to have to turn that in as the evidence, because that's probably the biggest evidence that you're going to have.
Right.
To prove that Bucky wasn't in his right state.
Right.
And you're going to turn it in. And really, America has really great research centers and things that could really prove those things right.
So what you're arguing...
What I'm arguing is that he should have taken those steps. He should have taken the steps of the law to prove himself.
But would it be wrong to say that there were people that would have ended Bucky before a fair trial was actually?
Yes.
Oh, certainly.
And yes, there were. I'm not gonna lie.
See, the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. was a clear.
I'm not gonna be shy about that.
Okay.
There were. But
if Colin were in the same situation, had he been hypnotized and had he killed people, but under this power of hypnosis, and he went to trial, and there were biased people that were gonna send him possibly to death, would you reach out and save him?
I like my mom. Did Colin kill my mom?
No. Okay. Good point. All right. Yes. For those of you who haven't seen, so
that was just a joke. That wasn't part of my argument.
A joke because it's from the movie. Yeah. You'll understand it if you watch the movie, but not because Sean wants his mom to die or anything.
I mean, saying and acting are two different things, and I can sit here every day. I can sit here and say that law is greater than personal morals every single day.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that. I think law is for the greater good, and I think if sacrifices need to be made, then it should be the individuals that should sacrifice rather than the giant group.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean,
Spock.
With me saying that, of course, when Colin is in that danger, I'm probably going to go out of my ways and go out of the law's ways to save him. And same thing goes for Landon, and same thing goes for my mom. I really love my mom. Love you, Mom. But saying and acting are two different things. When I'm not in that situation, I truly believe that law is a greater thing.
But it definitely, you could agree also.
You say the law is a greater thing. Just throw in a hypothetical scenario where people can start to abuse the law. What if the government was to come around and say, big issue right here, Second Amendment right is no longer allowed. We're going to come around and take all your guns away. You don't deserve that right. Would you then agree with the law?
I don't have a first of all, government. Well, technically, if they really go out of their ways to do it, they can. But that is going to mean that people are going to go out of their ways to make it right. And it's not the matter of, I can see where this conversation could be controversial. I'm not a firm believer of the Second Amendment, nor a person that's against the Second Amendment. I feel.
But yet, all you talk about is owning a gun.
I can really use a gun. I like guns. But it's when the government forces it that much to make it to go their ways on it, then they are going to have to fight the people. And when I said individual morals are greater than the laws, I meant really individual morals. When they come together, that's what makes the laws.
So you're saying
what my conclusion is going to be about
an agreed moral.
Agreed morals becomes laws
amongst lots of people. Yeah,
do not kill.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't think do not cheat became a thing, but
well, do not cheat's not a law. It's just an implied law from the Bible. So people with good morals are gonna lean on to that law.
And the Bible,
at that point, it's a moral law.
And the Bible is a little bit black and white because there's definitely a little bit of.
To anybody that's listening, please do not cheat. Like it's hurtful to the others.
And it's so hurtful.
That's how you get your car messed up.
Yeah. Well, that's how. If you're lucky, if you get your car messed up. But that's totally sidetracked. What I'm saying is that there are steps to make things right. There are steps provided by the government and the people to take to prove your innocence and to not make Captain America the war criminal. I don't know if anybody's seen the Spider-Man Homecoming, but he became a war criminal.
I think
that's based on the fact that everybody believed what the media told them.
And media,
I mean, this kind of goes and contradicts what I said earlier, and sort of agrees with what Sean said. The media has so much power today in what people choose to believe, and I feel like that's a big problem, is that people are so quick to believe what the person on CNN or what the person on Fox said without doing any additional research to form their own conclusion.
Yeah. No, that's without a doubt. I think another thing the media does, which is, I think, a beautiful example, is what we see in the film Captain America Civil War, is the fact that the media loves black and white situations. They love to take these two polar opposites and push them even further and further apart, because the bigger that gap is, the more people are going to fight about it.
Well, yeah.
And so I think that's interesting, especially, using Captain America. I love Captain America as a character, but I think because of what the producers have done with his character, what the script writers have done, is they've pushed him to the point of extremity. He's way too extreme.
And I feel the similar
there's no
way
balance.
About the Iron Man.
Yeah.
I think, let's really look into the past films with Captain America and Iron Man. I think they could have compromised. Yeah. Based on what they've shown in past films.
Okay. So we've kind of come to a consensus here. So that was a pretty. Honestly, it's probably pretty obvious that we have had this discussion lots of times.
And it's never ended.
Well, and really, if you, the listeners, if you want to, post on our Facebook, on our YouTube, and just let us know. If you want to dive more into that, we'd be happy to spend another, 5 podcasts talking. Maybe not 5, but, maybe not you just
5,
let us know.
10.
You just let us know where the hype is at. We can talk about that more. Really what we want to do now is relate that, bring that down to architecture. So kind of some things we've pointed out are the idea of, moral versus law in architecture, which we can kind of define that. Another thing we've talked about is, polarity of ideas and how those are being pressed further away from each other. Another idea we've talked about is compromise, So I think any of those ideas we can kind of hit on. How do those things relate to architecture? I think, we can kind of tackle it from society, from a people standpoint, or from an architecture standpoint. However you want to take it, just make sure kind of help us figure out where you're coming from. I think Colin's got some ideas rolling. So
yeah, I would say definitely from an architecture standpoint in the academia world, where we learn day in and day out these different typologies or ideas of how to build and design architecture, how we can start to implement our own ideas. and bring us into this society where majorly architecture has become this sort of set in stone, cookie cutter, follow the preset codes and laws, and that's how it's going to be. Now we start to, have this moral conflict with ourselves. Should we follow the code that is being set by, current architects?
So by code specifically, are you talking like style or trend?
I would say,
or are you talking physical
typology, this code to where architects are now almost being forced by the economy to build these domino immediate replication
cookie cutters, right?
Cookie cutter houses and buildings where everything looks the same, to sort of start to force us into this, idea of a utopian society where everything's the same. And, it's starting to bring us away from what architecture really is.
Okay.
And to where, you're allowed to express your ideas into a design of how people occupy a space. And now when you start to force us from this education of where we're taught to be free thinking and force us to be, it can only be this size, this shape, this way, that starts to come into that conflict. Like, do my morals surpass the law that's being set by the current architects?
Well, I think to add to that argument, so when you talk about this code not really meaning the law code for building, but in terms of like this style or this push
This
for
implied
I think
it's like
we're talking about the trend nowadays.
yeah, it's this building trend, especially here where
I'd say it's
we're at.
heavily implied.
Yeah, and
Heavily implied. Well, and I think it's not only implied by architects, but it's heavily influenced by the economy because
It's cheap,
it's
affordable.
It's cheap, affordable, and the thing is the way a lot of houses are built these days. I also have some background in construction. That is something that is a huge thing these days. We even live in an apartment where it's super cheaply built. It's very obvious to anyone who's been trained in construction or architecture. It's very obvious that it's cheaply built.
I mean, just listen to the wall.
Right. See, and what they do is they take this, this really unattractive building, this really unattractive structure, and they just put a beautiful dress on it. They put in the marble countertops and the dark finishes and all this stuff. So it becomes this really big false thing. But like Colin was saying, that is heavily influenced by the economy. So it's being pushed by this, and that is drawing. I would say that's really leaching the beauty out of architecture, that individuality we're talking about. So that becomes the polarity here. Kind of the economy versus the individual architect and design.
I'm going to make a reference here. You can't put a nice dress on an ugly girl and call her beautiful.
Wow, that's definitely.
I was trying. Yeah.
I know it's very.
I do not agree with that statement whatsoever.
I know it's harsh, but that's kind of the best way for you to picture how the economy and the public is starting to force architecture to lean towards this cookie cutter ideology. And I know it's harsh. You might hate me for it, but that's like the clearest way for you to see how imposing and direct and harsh it is to our freedom to express our own ideas.
I mean, you got the 2 versus 1 situation here again. I gotta say, neither do I agree with what's going on today. I would love to see unrestricted beauty in architecture, and I think if you just give somebody time and enough money to really get what's in their head out to the real world, I think it's going to be the greatest thing. And people who have done those things have been written down in history as great artists and great scientists and all those things. But the reality is that that's just not possible for everybody. Only 1 or 2 person. That's why they go down in the history book, because only 1 or 2 people are allowed to do that per generation.
Well, I think that's an interesting piece because
I don't think it's that they're allowed. I think it's that they were the first ones to say, "Hey, I don't want to follow."
No, they're not
this.
the first ones. They're the ones that are big enough, that have big enough names, and that are trustworthy enough.
It speaks really well to their efforts or to their circumstances, because some of those people come from money.
Yeah.
Some of them are just plain old extremely talented. Yeah. Some of them find great clients. There's all sorts of ways that these architects kind of become become known as individuals. I think, heading back to the economy, or I think the architect as a profession, their fight against this economy, I think is really more a solution of all architects, kind of like you were talking about, Sean, the multiple individuals having a moral that's higher than the law. I think if architects as a profession were to get together and be like, hey guys, let's stop designing crap for houses, or let's stop designing crap for buildings, if they all together agreed to a higher standard, that could really change some things, instead of just having these outliers like you were talking about, these people that just pop out and have a beautiful thing here, beautiful thing there. We could really make everything better if we were to strive together as a profession. But that's the hard part.
And the importance in that is that when the architects, if the day comes when architects come together, which I truly believe that they won't come.
They'll all be too busy, is my guess.
Oh, well, I'll definitely be dead before that day comes. But if that day ever comes, then the most important thing there won't be that everything else will be beautiful. The most important thing there will be that the standard will go up. And it's hard to raise a standard, but it's also hard. It's harder to drop your standards because you get used to the standard. And I think that.
Well, who's to say that as a society we should achieve to raise standards? We
don't have to achieve to raise standards. That's not enforced by anybody. But
nobody right now is raising the standards by everybody making cookie cutter homes.
Yeah, no, but I'm just. People have, and this is where compromise comes in, because no architect in the world, I truly believe, and this is where I might get a little cloud nine-ish thing, but I don't think there are any architects who had the education that we're going through right now that says, I want to be a cookie cutter builder when I get my license. When I get my license, I'm going to build crappy looking buildings for money, and that's all I'm gonna do. And that's where people make compromises.
Yeah.
That's the only job that they could find. And to the people that are paying them, that's the only money that they could pay them. They can't offer more. And that's the epitome that I kind of call this a tragedy porn, because it's been scripted to end in one very simple result. And everything just goes in that direction and that direction only, and it just can't escape. And it's sad, but that's the reality.
Well, I think it really becomes a financial trap because, for an architect to have clients, he needs to build things clients want, and uneducated clients, they won't, they wouldn't know good architecture.
They want what everybody else has.
They want what everybody else has. They want what's cheap. They want what fits in their neighborhood, which, already we're starting off with a bad start there.
0.01%.
Exactly. And so really part of it, I guess this kind of comes full circle. It comes back to really the people, those who are not architects, being educated about architecture. Really, that comes back to the point of our podcast, is we're here to bring the fire to the people and, help you understand what a building really can do in our lives, besides just give us a place to make things happen. A
building, especially your home, should be unique to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the things that you like to do, the things that define you should be replicated in your home.
Exactly.
If everybody's house looks the same, then it appears that everybody in that neighborhood's the same way. They go to the same boring job, they have the same boring life, they have the same boring everything.
That's not true.
That's not true.
Well, it's not true that doesn't happen, but it starts to look that way when everybody walks in the same front door to the same kitchen, sets their keys down on the same counter.
Like Winston Churchill said, humans create buildings, but after the building is done, buildings create you.
Well, and so what are those buildings creating then now? A cookie cutter neighborhood, what's that creating?
Cookie cutter buildings, I mean, to be
essentially robots.
To be frankly honest with you, cookie cutter buildings really are the staple of the United States suburbia.
Because we made it.
No, you're right.
We made it the staple.
It is.
You're totally right. But it, like Colin said, it's because we defined it. Yeah. We put that building block down, and the people just grabbed it and ran with it.
The thing is, by doing so, by making the cookie cutter homes the staple of the U.S. suburbia, people want it. That is the staple image in people's head of middle class, ordinary family.
Well, and you also have to look back to, I want to say it was Frank Lloyd Wright, one of my favorite architects I think we've learned about so far in our academia career. You know, for modern man, as architects, we're going to have to create our own new typology or way of designing to advance the modern society.
Yeah.
And that's up to us. But for us to accomplish that, there needs to be a full understanding between you, the listeners, as a client, and between us as an architect, to where we have a, sort of medium ground understanding to advance away from this cookie cutter home to this more self-reflectant home of you as the client.
And I'm not gonna lie, I lived in a cookie cutter home for
we've all been there.
10 years.
It's okay.
Before I came to college.
I forgive you for that. Sean.
I mean, I don't know if I can swear, but I did, and
it's okay.
I like my house.
It's okay,
It
Sean.
was a lovely home. It was a home by the lake, which I know Landon definitely haven't lived in.
Yeah, right.
Hasn't.
It's all right. It's all right.
I thought it was haven't.
English has a say. It's okay. It's okay.
But I loved my cookie cutter house. And quite honestly, if I never majored in architecture, I probably would not have.
Never would have known the difference.
I never would have known the difference. And the funny thing is, I knew as a kid, even growing up, I knew that there were multiple houses that looked exactly the same as my house. I didn't care. I didn't need to care. Because it was a $400,000 house. I had the luxury of not caring at that point.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what people think. And that's a goal of my parents' goal when they came to America was to get a house that was 2 stories tall and have a backyard with a lake view.
Well, it was the American suburbia dream, essentially. Yeah. And I think so. I think we're gonna try and start wrapping up here. We're gonna try and keep our long episodes down to 45 minutes for y'all for kind of a quicker listen. But I think this is kind of interesting how this conversation has gone from this conflicting polarity of Captain America, Iron Man, this individual versus the establishment, the moral law, not higher, excuse me, the moral law versus the law of the land, as it were. And we've kind of brought it down to this this conversation of architecture being what it is today, kind of how it's gotten there, the fact that it is defined by society. Ironically, it's our architecture is evident of the democracy because it's what the people want.
Yeah.
It's what they've chosen.
And at the end of the day, now I'm really wrapping my head around it, and I am definitely going to sound like a hypocrite by the end of this episode. There's no way for me to escape that. I don't really care.
Go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it.
It's okay for you to change your...
No, I'm not going to change my mind. People can have different ideas. That doesn't matter. Be proud. This just means that I have more ideas than Landon does. Because Landon only has that one idea that grows on it. I have 2 different ideas that grows.
I got you.
Again.
Yeah.
I'm so much smarter than Landon.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's definitely false.
So we're gonna So is it, Colin? Do you have any sum up remarks you want to talk about?
I mean, as Landon said, starting to bring this idea of your morals versus the law and how that starts to incorporate into our perspective, but also just to give y'all an idea. When you drive through your neighborhood next time, just take a look around. Step outside your door and see, does every house look the same or is there a little difference? Mm-hmm. And, just take that into perspective, not just in the form of architecture, but your daily life. Just start to think a little bigger than yourself and see how that all starts to play together and influence one another.
Yeah.
And I think you'll start to really open up to new ideas and really grow as a person. I know I have since I've started school. I've grown in ways I didn't think I would just by opening my eyes to different cultures, ideas, and the way I go about talking to people in my daily life. And I mean, I feel like that's what we need as a culture, especially in modern culture, to succeed and thrive and move forward.
Well, I'd like to piggyback on that. Really, just that change is totally possible. I think one of the diseases that our suburban suburban condition represents is just this idea of being content with where you are. And I think that is a horrible way to live life. I think there is always change that is always possible. And so, like Colin said, when you go out and look around and you're looking at all of the same houses maybe in the neighborhood where you live, or if you're appreciating the fact that they're different, whatever it is, there always can be better. And that's something, in architecture school, we're no strangers to that idea that better is always ahead of you, and you can always keep pushing and that goes for anything in life. I'm going to start preaching here, but that really is the truth of it. You can always find a better condition. You can always make a better future, and that's really what we're aiming for with this. Sean, do you want to wrap up with anything?
I just actually one thing I'd like to mention. Colin and I were going to the driving range,
right?
And there was a whole entire neighborhood of same exact houses. They were shy about it.
The same driveway, the same brick, the same colored door, the same grass, the same bushes.
Same white pickup truck parked in the front too, right?
My wrap up would be,
just try to be better.
Be better and, open a book.
Yes.
Open a nearest book to you and start reading. And I'm not saying that you guys are dumb or anything. I rarely read nowadays. I used to like reading, but reading just broadens your perspective more than anything. Well, I mean, if you have enough money to go out and travel, be my guest, but read a book. Fiction, non-fiction, doesn't matter. Read classics. Read Shakespeare. Read something that you never even thought about reading in high school. Those things, whether you know it or not, whenever you're done with that book, it has already broadened your perspectives to this world. And once you have a broad enough perspective, then you will really see the difference. And that kind of things are what makes this world change.
I agree. All right. Well, I know on our behalf, we'd like to thank you for your time, for listening to us. We're really happy to be here recording this pilot episode. We do also really appreciate your feedback. So, we really want to continue to develop architectural ideas and help us move forward. So check out our Facebook, Prometheus Podcast. We are also on YouTube, other social media outlets pending, but we're working on all that stuff. Please give us feedback. Tell your friends to like us. Tell your friends to listen. We plan to do this on a pretty regular basis, probably weekly. We're going to be recording these podcasts. We've got a whole list of topics, so you don't need to worry, but we also do happily accept any topics you'd like for us to share.
Yeah, please.
Like us, share us. Comment, just interact. We really are looking forward to this venture. So,
or subscribe. He left that part out.
Subscribe too. That's a big one. Colin, you look like you want to say something. No, just a good smile.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we love you guys. On our side from Prometheus Podcast, we thank you again, and we will see you later.